funny friends, my funny friends, my funky friends now. My funny friends, my funny friends, my funky friends now.
Starring Drew Harrison and Will Abeles.
Well, welcome back to My Funny Friends. I'm happy to introduce my co-host, my confidant, Drew Harrison. Hi, Drew.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good.
Feeling good.
And
I'm excited about this week's episode, man.
yeah, I'm feeling good about this episode as well. I'm excited. It's gonna be fun. I love that we can see your expression as I say it's gonna be fun.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know, guys. We'll see, but
We'll try.
Yeah.
But without any more hesitation, this week's funny friend is Anthony DeVito.
Hey,
what's up? Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I think it'll live up to the hype that you guys have said.
Anthony, I got to see a set of yours at Dead Crow in Wilmington, North Carolina. I didn't get to hang out for the show and like introduce myself and meet you and everything, but I caught your set before I had to dip out, and it was fantastic. I loved it.
Oh, thanks so much, man. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I love that room. There's like they have a new space now, right?
They do. They got a compound now. They got like
really?
two inside bar, a showroom, and then like an outdoor like beer garden.
Oh, damn. That's awesome, man. Yeah, because I love that town too. That's such a cool town.
That's where that's where I started out at. It was Wilmington.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, man. That seems to generate, I think there was like a really, really funny Maddie Weiner. I think she's a North Carolina comic, right?
Yeah.
That moved
She's
to
hilarious.
Chicago. Dude, she's so funny. And like Jordan Scott, there's a lot of funny. I think you guys have like a couple between Good Nights and Dead Crow. You have some really good rooms, and Asheville, obviously, in North Carolina.
Yeah,
it really fosters some good comics.
It's fantastic. It was. I couldn't imagine coming up anywhere else for sure.
Yeah, no, I came up in New York, so I never thought I was. I've never thought I was any good.
It's been beat down your whole career.
Yeah, I was beat down so badly because other places, like you'll do mics and it's not just comics, it'll be some audience, so you have like you have a gauge on how jokes are going to work in front of real people. New York, man, you're only doing mics in front of other comics who you think hate you. They're just nervous.
Yeah.
I don't really hate you. I just didn't. I was worried about what I was going to say.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, that guy is so, and it's like, no, that guy is freaking out. Like that's all that's happening at the mic. But yeah, you get really good at shitting on your friends and not looking audiences in the eye.
Yeah.
And coming up with creative, dark premises with punchlines that don't really work. So you get really good coming up. I'm just jumping right in.
What year did you start in New York?
I started, I believe, 2008 or 2009.
Okay.
So I started. So when I was starting, UCB was like still sort of in its prime, if not like sort of. Maybe it had plateaued already and it was starting to go down, but it was still like pretty much like, the big dogs were like Pete Holmes, Hannibal was there. And then obviously a lot of guys that we know now that are like borderline famous or famous that, were just in my class of starting. But yeah, man, it's just comics at mics teach you if a premise is good and original, because it's like, especially in New York, because you have comics that move from all over the country to this one location to be a really great stand-up comedian. So they're all comedy nerds. So they've heard every take, they've heard every angle. So it's like, if you can get up there and have an original take or an original angle on something, they're gonna reward you for that. But comics, like, this is why we're comedians, is because like we're usually faster than audiences at guessing where the joke is going to go. So the punchline, usually it's like so hard to surprise other comedians with a punchline. So you get really good at writing concepts that are your own, but the clubs and audiences really teach you how to write hard punches. And that's just something that like comics don't necessarily do, because a broad punchline for a comic as an audience member, they're like, I've heard this, or this is a trick, or this will work, whatever. But an audience obviously needs that because they're just there to laugh. They're not there
Right.
to
Yeah.
have their
Yeah, like
mind
please
change.
feed me this joke. I don't want to
Yeah,
think
exactly.
about it.
So you need both, but like I credit the New York mics, especially comedians in like as your sole audience for really really fostering honest and unique material.
Nice.
What made you want to start? So it's like 2008, 2009. What
Sure.
like were you one of those that just kind of were like, all right, there's an open mic, I'll go try this out? Did like a friend trick you into it? Or have you always been kind of interested in stand-up and that was finally the chance for you to do it?
Right. Yeah, no, I was super interested in stand-up as a kid. Like I was obsessed with it, but I was like crippling shy. So I never thought I could be that person who's up there and confident. They have a microphone in their hand. They're looking people in the eye, And when you're young, it just seems like magic. You don't know what like. I didn't think they wrote anything. I just was like, I was like, how are these people not like Mensa geniuses? Like they're just up there doing that. That's insane. So I was like, well, I can't do that. I know my SAT scores. There's no way I'll be able to pull that off. I barely cracked 4 digits,
Yeah.
But I was obsessed with it. My mom took me to go see George Carlin as like a surprise. We did a family vacation to Vegas when I was in like in middle school, and I saw him at Abeles, and it was like the coolest thing, man.
Wow,
because I was there, and like it's just this all ages show, and I got that like like you don't really understand, I guess, the nuances of concepts, but you understand like he has that great abortion joke about I forget the wording now, but about like the conservatives they care so much about like soldiers, but they hate abortion or whatever, so they're all about killing people. You just gotta like wait or whatever it is, and like so you get like the connections. You don't understand like, but you get like that's like hilarious as a connection. And then it was so cool because man, I was just in the crowd with all these people from just such a wide range of ages and just laughing at like this guy who was just unbridled funny. Like it was just so cool to me. And I was watching my mom crack up and I'm cracking up, and he's talking about farts. I'm loving it. He's talking about, politics. I don't really get it, but he's goofy enough where I'm enjoying myself. So yeah, and I was just so obsessed with it. So
yeah. I think the 2 moments I had were when I was like growing up, my grandmother used to have like these Johnny Carson VHS tapes, and it was all the stand-ups.
Yeah.
And I remember like kind of the same thing, like watching it, you were like, you just assumed it just came out of them so naturally, right? And then I remember the first time I ever tried, and you were just like, oh, it'll just come to me, and then you're just bombing for and like cursing your grandmother's name,
When does it start? When does it kick in? I don't know. I don't get this.
Yeah, I don't think it's a real. People talk about it as if it's like a mystical thing. It's just like anything else, where you're incrementally getting better over time. You're not really noticing it because the change is so small that you could ever notice, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, magic, but it's not magic. And I think that's what keeps so many people from either doing stand-up or being really intimidated by stand-up, because you're like, you hear people talk about it as if you're just like, you watch Richard Pryor and you're like, there's like 3 people in the history of comedy that can do that, and that's why he's the greatest comedian ever.
Yeah.
But everybody else is just like, you're just getting better slowly over time. It's like it's some math and it's some art, and that's what makes it really fun, because it's because you can have a handle on how it can work, but you never really have a handle on it. And I think that challenge is kind of what keeps coming back.
I got you. Yeah. So when you saw Carlin in middle school, did you have all those jokes ready to fire at your friends the next few days at school, or like were you still the shy kid where you're like, I'm not telling these jokes?
Yeah, I was a shy kid. Also, like Carlin felt like the vessel for the jokes was like part of the fun. He was just kind of like crabby, raspy. He always seemed like even when I was like, he was probably 50. I was like, that's 100-year-old man. You know what I mean? When you're like, kid, you're like,
yeah.
You're like, man, how is this corpse so lively?
He blew my mind as a kid, because the first time I ever was introduced to George Carlin, I had a little brother who was very into Thomas the Tank Engine. So he was the conductor of Thomas the Tank Engine. And then I saw his stand-up and I was like, wait, what? It blew my mind. You know,
Yeah,
you don't
man.
think
He
about
was a-
comics out there trying to get
Yeah.
other jobs and entertainment, you know?
Yeah.
Totally. It's so funny too, as you do it, like when you're outside of it, you're like, oh man, you feel bad. You know, you're like, oh man, he's this cartoon tank. But then when you get into it, you're like, man, that allowed him to work for
Yeah.
like 10 years, you know, like it's
They're like
so
killing to be a
yeah,
cartoon
I remember
tank.
I used-
Yeah.
yeah, I'd watch like when I was younger. I think I saw David Cross in like an anime. He was in like a Chipmunks movie, and I was like, poor David Cross. But I'm like, oh, that enabled him to have homes. Like comedy doesn't make you like that much money, but all this other nonsense makes you tons. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember like the first time I ever got like asked to audition for a commercial, I was like, I don't want to do this. I was like, I want to just do stand up.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get it because I didn't really understand what I was doing in the audition. I didn't have headshots. Like, it was like a mess from start to finish.
Right. You're like, this is my face. What more do you need? Coward?
Yeah.
Can't you just take a picture
exactly.
now? Like, what's up?
It's sort of similar to this. Yeah. And then I found out like what the pay was later, and I was just like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever auditioned for a commercial since. I think it was like a one and done situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had some horrible. Yeah, I remember the first, like, it was one of my good friends' bachelor party, and it was like a Verizon commercial. And in comedy, you're used to a certain ceiling of money. It's like $20 and a couple chicken wings, and you're like, all right, I know my pay. But like, I was new to like the commercial world and how like the possibilities of that. And I like called. I had just gotten his agent, and it was like this whole exciting thing, whatever. Call her, and I'm like, I can't do this Verizon commercial. I got my buddy's bachelor party, and she was like, yeah, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I'll just tell you how much money you would make if you booked this commercial. And it was like 40 grand.
Yeah.
I was like, man, Mike, if I get this, I'll pay for your wedding.
Like, I'll catch the next one, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I didn't get it, but all the commercial auditions I ever went out for is super ethnic parts. It was always cab driver or hot dog vendor. And I remember there was one time, man, it was so awkward because I would be in the room with like, who clearly like, and I'm not just like saying like, oh, bird's eye view, they're Middle Eastern guys. I have their names on the call sheet. Like these are guys named Samir, and I'm like, oh, this is like weird. I'm Anthony. So there was one time, it was the director of The Bourne Identity was doing this commercial, but Bourne Identity, it was a callback. So now the director's in the room, you have all these other people in the room, and Bourne Identity is my mom's favorite movie. So I walked in and I was like, I think his name is Doug, and I was like, oh hey man, The Bourne Identity is my mom's favorite movie, and he was like, what? Like, and I was like, I'm so excited, man. She's like pumped about this. And like, he's just like, yeah, man, whatever. So I had to do a cab driver, and I did my first take. It was awful. I'm not a very good actor. It was very bad. But then they were like, you could tell them like they were trying to like, they were being delicate with their words because they were trying to figure out how to say what they wanted to say. And they were like, can you make this like more ethnic? And I knew what they meant. So I was like, yeah, I could. I was like, I could. But if I do that, it's going to be racist because I'm not good at voices. So it's just going to come out like, know that. And they were like, I'm sure it'll be fine. And then I started. It was so bad. Like you should have seen their faces of like, oh my God, like we have to stop. Like they have a tape of that like somewhere. And if I ever get anything, I'm canceled immediately. I already know.
Oh, that's gonna just rise right to the top. Yeah.
Oh man, it's so bad. It's yeah. But commercial auditions, it's terrible.
So you're originally from North Jersey.
Yes.
And so you've been close to the city your whole life, it sounds like.
Yes.
When did you move? Like how long between like moving to the city on your own and starting stand-up was there? Or was it just like you moved there for stand-up?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, North Jersey, it's all like it's a super Italian neighborhood. And like nobody from Jersey goes to New York because they're all pig-headed morons. Who think they have everything. It's like insane, their logic. Like, dude, people fly from the Netherlands to go to visit New York for like a couple days and are awestruck by everything. People in Jersey are like, why would I ever cross the bridge? Like, Like, just they're nuts, man. Yeah, we never really went. We would go see like Broadway shows, maybe like once every couple of years. But also New York, when I grew up in the 90s. New York was like on the cusp of like getting out of dangerous to getting, sort of commercialized. But it was still pretty rough. Like Times Square when I grew up was like, it was a lot of just like drug addicts, porno theaters. Like there wasn't like any popcorn shops. Yeah, there was like Caroline's, a couple Broadway shows, and in between there, everybody was getting stabbed. And I would be like, I don't know why there are all these sports teams in New York, man. This place is crazy.
Why do people want to come here?
Yeah, man, it just seemed so dangerous. So we didn't really go too much as a kid. But yeah, my trajectory into comedy, I went to college for architecture, and I was actually working post college in an architecture firm for a few years. I was so bad at architect. Like,
that's something you can't be bad at.
I know.
It's like he has this reputation of the bridge falls every time.
Yeah,
every time.
No, dude, I wake up in cold sweats about a project in Fort Lee to this day that I work. There's no way that building's up.
I'm gonna get to see that update on my phone and just be like, I know whose fault this is.
yeah. And architectural drawings are legal documents, so you're liable if anything happens.
Wow.
And I would just
that's no pressure at all.
Oh my God, I would screw up constantly. I was good at theoretical architecture, like the poetry of it or whatever. Putting together, I could not for the life of me. I was so bad. But I kind of knew, like, you kind of know, like, I didn't know anybody who was a comedian. I didn't even know you could do it, how to do it, how you go about it. I didn't know anybody remotely close in, kind of blue collars, Northern Jersey that was in the arts. So I had no idea how you get involved or that you could get paid doing it, any of that stuff. So I was kind of resigned to be this like funny architect who was putting everyone in harm's way by continuing. But there were signs. Like, I went to college for architecture. My first project, I've done, a long story about this, but like the short of it is like, yeah, I clearly wanted to be a comedian. We had to design this building. We're on the ground floor. It was retail space, and the top floor was supposed to be apartment buildings. And my idea was a store where you rent old people for parties, and then they live in the apartments above. And you weren't even supposed to focus on the business end of it. You were just supposed to make an architectural drawing. And I was like, man, we had to present our project, and I was just going through like all of, how we weigh the old people for pricing, those kinds of things. And my classmates were like, this kid is insane, and this is so but yeah, my professors, like, they tried to kick me out of architecture school.
Jesus.
That's great.
So then, yeah, from there, I kind of graduated college. I traveled, I bounced around a little bit. And then at some point, I had worked in a firm in North Jersey for a couple of years and sort of decided, I started writing sketch and I started writing jokes with a friend of mine, Greg Stone, who's a New York City comedian who we've been best friends since high school. He had been doing stand-up for years, and I would kind of write for him. I would go to the clubs, I'd give him tags, those kinds of things, and kind of building up the courage to do it on my own. And then we started doing sketch in Jersey in bars that, like, boy, man, had no...
That's the ideal fostering ground for sketches.
I'm sure they were super receptive to it.
Super receptive, man. Just a bunch of meathead Italian iron workers. We're trying to do like heady sketches about 9/11, and they were like, it was just, it couldn't have been a worse fit for the thing.
No.
But it's like their shift beer.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, you're disrespecting firefighters. We're trying to do these like Mr. Show type, like unraveling sketches.
There's layers, I promise.
Yes. Yeah. So did that for a little bit, and then traveled again for like another year or so. And then I think around like 27, moved to New York. Kind of, I think when you're away from something for a while, I knew I wasn't going to do architecture. I didn't know what I was going to do. I really liked writing, especially comedy and jokes, but I still never really saw myself as a performer. Like, even when I gave that architectural presentation, like, I knew I had to follow through with it because I thought the idea was so funny that like when you think of something so funny, you're like, oh, I can't let down how funny I think this is, not to go. but I was like shaking, you know what I mean? Like my body was hot. I was like, and my voice was cracking. So I was like, I don't think I'm a performer. So when I moved to New York, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So then I started taking improv at UCB because I thought like, oh, there'll be other people up there with me. It won't be so scary. And so Greg and I went through UCB together. But the thing with that, I didn't really, I guess, think about was that I had the ability to let other people down on stage. Which was, it really preyed on like my insecurity. So every time a scene failed, I'd be like, I'm so sorry,
My
everybody.
bad,
I
guys.
wanted to,
My bad.
I wanted to
Yeah.
turn face and apologize to the group. And it was kind of like, oh, I'd rather if I fail, I'm the only one that gets hurt by that. So I was just right. I would always be writing jokes, and then eventually started doing mics. At first, I went under a fake name, and I would tell these like meandering stories that went nowhere. And the joke was that it went nowhere. And some people liked it a lot. And it's funny because like, you know, you have those people who like see you for like your first mic and then see you years later and don't really assume there's been any growth in between. Like, so I remember Jordan Carlos, like, he was like, man, he was like, I saw you at that mic at the Pit like 4 years ago. I still like that story you told about buying a shower curtain at Target, man. I can't wait for what you're going to do on this show. And then like, it was like a bunch of pedestrian jokes. And he was like, like, it was like took an interesting turn, like where you went from point A to point B kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then I started doing stand up, just going around mics in New York as Leslie Oliver for like a month or two, and then started doing stand up as myself with like the written material I had. And people were like surprisingly receptive to it. And I was like getting better at being a performer. I'm still not there, but like that's the part that always like for me had to like really catch up because I had been writing for a long time.
Would you attribute becoming a better performer to anything other than just doing it more?
Yeah, I think repetition and watching other people who
Okay.
like you know, Greg, who I've been talking about, he was like out of the gates, he was this just like lights out performer. So I think watching him, but then also watching like I mentioned like Pete Holmes, even people that you're like, oh, I'm nothing like this guy, but to see sort of how confident they are and how comfortable they are, you sort of just pick up on these little traits that they do and you try to emulate them. You know, that's what everybody does when they can't sort of, when they're trying to get to a place, you put yourself in the position of the people that you want to be like, and then eventually the skin of them sort of sheds and then you're yourself a little bit more. But I had to sort of channel those people just to survive on stage. Because honestly, in order just to do the jokes justice, that's where I would feel bad. You would look, you know, you always look at these things as like almost like a separate entity, and you're like, man, I know how funny these things could be in the hands of someone who was able to really convey them. And it's such a shame that they have to go through me. But so I always felt like I had to get better to service what I was working on.
That's funny, man, because a lot of people do the opposite. You know what I mean? Like they have the performance part figured out, and they're like, man, if the writing could just get there, I promise I could sell this writing.
Well, yeah, man, I'm such an introverted weirdo that it took a lot for me to get up there to do it. And a lot to even share the ideas. Because, you know, like I said, man, I grew up in North Jersey, like loud Italian family that never let me talk, you know? So they couldn't believe, like my mom was like, you want to do comedy? She was like, I didn't even know you were funny. I didn't even know you talked.
That's fantastic. Because that's how I was coming up. You know, I was a quiet, shy kid. I had a lot of funny friends in my group that I would have something funny to say, but 3 people would beat me to it. I'd be like, okay, all right.
Yeah, 3 people would beat me to it. And I played sports, so it was like, you know, there was just no room for this. Like, I was in this no man's land where it was like I was too weird for everybody on the basketball team, but like I also didn't get the theater kids, you know. So everybody was just like, that kid is strange. Like most people just thought I was going to be a school shooter.
Well, he'll come back.
Well, and that's why I got into architecture. Yeah, so you could do it the other way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't shoot a school, but I will make sure a bridge collapses. Yeah.
Who's on that bridge? I don't know.
So but like you mentioned your grandmother. Yeah, my grandmother was probably, I think, purposely and accidentally the funniest. Like she was a giant influence.
That's fantastic.
She was just so funny as like a character who doesn't even know she's a character. But then
Yeah.
like incredibly witty. And so she probably was on a daily basis my biggest influence, I would say.
That's fantastic. I had a very funny Southern grandmother growing up.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, she was just so hard-headed, and I would just like, it's like,
Yeah.
wow. Like I remember she'd wear, obviously she, like just appearance-wise, she drew her eyebrows on, but not at the right height, so they were like, she just looked shocked by everything.
Was it on purpose, or was it?
No,
like
no. It
Oh,
just
okay.
no. She like singed her eyebrows off cooking soup, however many years ago. So she would draw them on, but like it just added so much to everything she said.
That's
And then
fantastic.
she would wear these black driving gloves with these like wraparound shades. Like, it was just in a Ford
Yes.
Escort, just going nuts around town.
Oh,
Hand
man.
on the horn. And I was like, why do you beep the horn? She was like, I need to let other cars know like I'm coming through. And I was like, this is like, I was like, all like a king does that.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yeah. It was so cool, so funny. She would make me laugh so hard.
That's fantastic.
Cool. So you're going around New York. You're doing the mics. You're starting to create your like kind of group that you want to go around with. You've changed your name back to your own name.
Yeah.
You've changed your name back. Did anyone say anything? Did you just show up one day and just start going by your regular name? And everyone was like, I thought your name was Leslie.
No,
Or did people know it was the stage name?
I think people knew it was a stage name because I would lean into it a little bit. Like I'd call myself the Les Dog, like I was, I think, and the bits that I was doing were, I think, especially like comedy savvy, just comedy nerds that are in the audience, they knew exactly what was happening. They knew that I was like purposely telling these boring stories and like really laboring on these parts. And then like they got the joke. And like to some people, they were like, this is very funny. To other people, they were like, I don't know why this guy made me sit through this. But they got that like, oh, he's doing a bit up here.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I started, and I only had done that probably like a handful of times, and New York is so spread out that it's like, yeah, man, 9 people might see you as Leslie Oliver. They might never see you again. You might never see them again,
Yeah.
So when I started going by my real name and doing prepared material, I don't think there were any like Leslie heads out there that were like,
your fans were heartbroken, man.
What the hell? Yeah.
No one showed up with like a tattoo on their chest. They were like, what do I do with this?
Yeah, no. So you start to assemble the people around you that you think are funny, but more than that you feel comfortable around,
Yeah.
That's grueling. You know what I mean? Like how many mics were you doing a night that you gotta have somebody to keep you going,
Yeah, man, probably like 2 or 3. I mean, I was very fortunate. Like I said, like Greg and I had been friends since high school. So we kind of started in New York together. He'd already been doing comedy probably like 8 or 10 years. So we had a friendship that existed outside of comedy, which was huge.
Big
yeah,
time.
There's just so much trust and there's so much shorthand built into that. And then, but the key for me, like there were so many people that were so funny in New York, but I was either intimidated by them or they didn't seem like people I'd want to be friends with, even though they were so funny. So I kind of palled around with anyone who I thought was funny, not even on stage, really. If I thought they were funny off stage and cool, I was like, I'd like to be friends with you. Because in my head, I was like, all right, you'll either catch up and stand up or you'll just not do it. And that's fine. Like I had all my friends were not stand ups. So it's like, it wasn't like I was, most of my friends were architects or like, ecstasy salesmen in Jersey. So it was like,
gotta have that friend around.
Yeah. So the idea of like having friends that were solely stand-ups really wasn't important to me.
No, I feel like you need that variety. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like because then you just get wound in that life 24/7, and then you're like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. Like,
exactly. And they're less interesting, because everyone's just working on jokes and like mining from either their observations or the life they've had and all the characters involved in that life. I was well more interested in like the people that they're just walking through life every day hilarious, not knowing that they were hilarious. Like that's so much more interesting to me.
For sure.
But yeah,
I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, that's a thing with because Nashville's such a smaller scene, but I feel like everyone that's become friends here, like the kids starting out, like there's a whole new group of open micers, and they've been really interesting to watch over the last year because they're starting comedy in the middle of a pandemic,
Right.
but on top of that, they also have a very different exposure to comedy than I think we all had starting out
Sure.
because you would have been before Netflix, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't just something that was on TV
Totally.
like every single day if you want it to be. It could be the entire day,
Yeah.
and so it's funny watching these guys start out, and they're all very close because they're all starting at the same time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they all know how to mimic a comedian on stage.
Yes.
And then kind of what you were saying is like but then the jokes aren't there yet, so
Yeah.
they move like a comic, they know how to hold a microphone like a
Yeah,
comic,
yeah.
but then they talk, and that's where it stops.
Like, oh, almost had me.
You
Yeah,
can
and
you
so
can always you can always see who's going to be like a great comedian just in terms of their thought process. Even
yeah,
like
yeah.
the performance, all that stuff, like it's just a comedic mind. I've never really been able to put my finger on what it is exactly, but it's just like this approach to life where it's just slightly askew, and you can
Mhm.
always see it, where you just go, oh, their brain processes the world in this like joke kind of a way, and like the rest of it'll just catch up to itself, but you always know when that's there. And some people don't have it initially and they figure out how to get it or think like one, whatever it is. But the people where you're like, I don't, whatever happens, this person, I don't know what's going to happen in their life, but they could be an incredible comedian
Yeah.
just in terms of how they're going through the world.
Yeah, and I think back to a point you made earlier, like you were saying how you you think it's like this impossible thing to be good at stand up, but
Oh,
it just takes so long, and you just get better in increments, and then one day you're just good at it, right?
yeah.
But also your group is getting better at the same time. So that's the thing, is you don't really have anything to compare it to except for the people that are like not behind you, but just starting out or newer to it.
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, oh, I guess I am getting a little bit better at this. But when the group's getting good too, you're like, you just don't notice,
Yeah.
'cause
Oh, totally.
it's
Yeah.
all happening at once. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, because in your circle, yeah, exactly what you're saying. You're playing to the level of your competition, so you're just the whole time not noticing. But yeah, when you see the guy go up there with like even a joke that maybe like a similar to joke to what you tried to attempt a couple years ago, then you're like, oh, that's like tangible growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see it now.
Yeah.
So how in so you got your group in New York that you're hanging out with. Now, was the landscape of New York comedy like you pick a couple clubs and start hanging out there? Like what was the next step in that?
It was more, I mean, the alt scene was so big, like, because that was
Yeah.
when I came up, it was like podcasts were beginning to get huge. Comedy like you were saying before, you had so much access to comedy. So like comedy nerd and was really in full swing. So the clubs I think people were more interested in the alt scene at that time and
Mhm.
doing, like mics at like Cake Shop and these like cool kind of bars in like the Lower East Side and in Brooklyn. And I think we were all just like trying to get really good at this. The club mics were good because there weren't as many people who meant something to you there comedically. So you could kind of grow outside of a watchful eye. Like the Creek was huge when I was
Mhm.
coming.
Yeah.
It was this space in Long Island City that was this like clubhouse, like folklorish kind of environment. Like people talk about it the way like they talk about the store, just like
Yeah.
like places in Boston. It was just this like time and place sort of a venue, and but there it was every great everybody in my class that was going to be this great comic that loved comedy was there, and it was like a showcase. You really had to bring it, so it didn't really allow for a lot of experimentation, I felt. And not
You had to bring your
like
A
if
game.
I was yeah, like if being at that place, it was intimidating, it was nerve-wracking. So I would do a lot of club mics during the week just because they allowed me to kind of say things that were wrong, not funny, and they were 5 minutes, so you had to fill
Yeah.
the time somehow. So you would get better at riffing, and you wouldn't care, like, because the people in the crowd are like, that's like a 45-year-old divorced dad. Like
Yeah.
he's not here to be great at saying, he's just here to get over what he's trying to get over. So it's like, I don't care about bombing in front of him, but I
Yeah.
would care about bombing at the creek in front of these people that like really meant something. So I think a good mix of both was essential for building myself comedically. But yeah, it was a lot of running around at like alt rooms. Like those were the bit, like UCB, that everybody wanted to do Gut Bucket. That was the mic Friday nights at UCB. It was like a midnight mic. Pete Holmes ran it. Everyone put their name in the bucket. Only like 10 people would get called, but it was like this great audience. And like that was kind of the game. And then, I think the clubs started to come up, the alt scene kind of came down, they met somewhere, and then comics were we were all starting to work clubs a little bit. But in the beginning, it was just like a bunch of comedy nerds scrambling around with like, ratty t-shirts and like skateboard decks and things like that.
Nice.
Yeah, I remember because I got out for like 2 years. I left comedy for 2 years, then came back in, and that was like I remember that there was a huge independent scene in Brooklyn, and then I came back, and that was about the shift when like I think the stand didn't quite move to its new location yet,
Right.
but it was like a year out from doing that, I think.
Yeah.
And that was when I feel like the clubs kind of shifted back up, and it was like there was still the scene in Brooklyn, but it just changed,
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, and bars started shutting down too. That was the thing, is I feel like a lot of spots just started closing, and you were like, well, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah. When I started, the most of comedy, I mean, it could have also been I was just starting, but it seemed like the bulk of great comedy in New York was happening in bar rooms or these like independent venues. And the clubs felt like, oh, that's for more pedestrian, more broad sort of material, more like super honed, but not really terribly interesting. But then, like the stand happening, and then like New York Comedy Club elevating itself under new ownership made comics want to work those places, because the Cellar was always like, I'm not Jim Gaffigan. How am I ever going to get there? Like that's not even my frame of mind. But these other places, you were like, well, I don't want to go to. New York Comedy Club used to be a shithole. Like, and the stand didn't exist, so you really didn't have a ton of options. So you didn't really want to work the clubs, even if you could. So, but once the clubs started, being a little bit cooler, and then with bars, some bar shows shutting down, especially big ones. Once big bar shows shut down, nobody knows what to do. But the Creek always held strong. It was this hub kind of place. And now it's like so much of comedy happens on phones that it's not even about this like real in-person collective gathering. It's just like about just churning out content and gaining followers. And it happens in isolation. And it's just like, that's the part that sucks. That's the part I really miss.
Yeah. Whenever I see someone that like is able to put a new joke like every 3 days on TikTok, I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Like, what do you have the time to edit it, let alone write the joke and then perform it and everything?
Yeah, no. I miss seeing these like really quality, refined, outside the box takes. Now it's just like, not everybody, but like it's you get a lot of traction from being quick and inflammatory. And
it's kind of a formula at this point.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like insert my take in this formula, and now I have 1 million followers on TikTok.
Yeah, and just man, and have that take be as incendiary as possible, and you're good to go. And then everyone goes, "That guy's a great comedian." You're like, "That guy's not even a comedian yet."
Right? Like, he maybe has 7 minutes. Maybe.
Yeah. But I mean, it's cyclical, like you kind of go around this thing long enough, you see that it's like, this isn't forever. So it's kind of like batten down the hatches, weather the storm. I'm excited for the hot take philosopher era of comedy to kind of pass.
Yeah. So Anthony, you have a credible resume in comedy. So we're going through. You're in the mics. You're doing the shows. And so, what was your first TV spot?
My first TV spot was Gotham Comedy Live on Access TV.
Oh man, big Gotham Live fan. Like we got Pluto TV now, and one of the channels just shows old Gotham, and I love it so much.
Dude, it's kind of great because you see a lot of comics. It's a lot of comics' first TV spot, because it was run through the Mazzillis, who own Gotham Comedy Club. So, and it was mainly a New York show, and it would happen every week. So, it was a lot of people's first spot. And it was really fun because it was like, you knew it was on Access TV. So you're like, I didn't even know that was a channel. So you're like, this is no pressure. It's in Midtown. So you're like, I just take the subway there. The money for what at the time you were making was like astronomical. There wasn't too much TV stuff involved to kind of throw you off, because that's usually what happens with TV stuff. There's so many cameras, or there's makeup, or there's like stand here, that's when you get nervous, because it starts to not feel like how you normally perform. But with Gotham, it was like, it was taped live. There was some crazy celebrity hosts. So you were like, I remember for me, it was Mark Carey from Hanging with Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
So man, I'm just like excited to meet him,
Yeah.
and like, and he could give a shit. Like his intro for me, he was like, at the time I had nothing to plug with my podcast, which was the Rad Dude Cast. And he was like, man, this next guy, he's got a podcast. It's the Rad Drive, Rad Dude. He'll tell you about it. As if
He'll tell you about it.
So that made me laugh so hard. So it was like, it was so comfortable, and it was so low stakes that it was so fun. And I didn't even know how anyone could even watch it. And then this crazy thing with that was that the band Train happened to see that performance and tweeted at me. And then I became friends with the band Train and did their cruise ship show and all kinds of crazy nonsense from there.
What?
Yeah, it was nuts, man.
You could have given me 100 guesses as to what band you were about to say. I don't think Train would have ever come up.
Yeah, it was wild, man. Because you do a TV thing, people tweet at you afterwards, and like one of them was at Train, and I was like, "Hey, thanks." Not thinking anything of it. I was like, a guy named Train, and then I looked, and I was like, "This is the lead singer of the guy who sang Drops of Jupiter." So I hit him up. I say thanks, and then he was like, "I'm coming to New York in a couple months. I'd love for you to do my podcast." I was like, "Sure."
Yeah.
I do the podcast. We hit it off. We have this like crazy night in New York where we end up like partying with Dennis Quaid, singing songs till like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then we became kind of friends. And then they have a cruise that goes every year. They booked me to do comedy on the boat. I did it. Shaggy was there. Like we ended up hanging out. It was just this wild.
Your celebrity list is just, it's too, I can't keep up.
Yeah. They're all 90s celebrities.
I mean, is there any better celebrities though? I don't think so.
No, it was awesome, man. And they're so cool. And yeah, it was just this crazy thing that happened from a television spot on a network that I didn't even know people got. I thought it was like state television from Russia or something. I didn't even know.
Yeah, that's insane, man.
It was nuts.
You know what I mean? You never know what
exactly
weird adventure you're gonna go into because of this.
Yeah,
well, that's what I was going to ask you is like, do you ever think there's just this like with comedy specifically, do you ever think there's just like this one moment where you're like, okay, and now that's the moment that I look back on and every other opportunity came from that moment? Or is it still just kind of like, you never know what that moment is?
You kind of never know, because usually it's like a series, it's like usually someone sees you and they just clock you. Sometimes they go, that guy's really funny. They come up to you right away, you get work, whatever it is. But usually they clock you and they go, oh, there's something about this guy that I really like. And then they see you again, maybe a year from there, and they go, this guy's still really good. And then they see you again and they go, I'm going to have him open for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, sometimes it happens like that with the Access TV and the Train thing, where it's just like,
right.
You can trace it back to exactly what it is. But usually it kind of happens in the shadows. And then like someone says something to you and you're like, oh, I didn't even know like you were a fan of mine. I didn't even know you would know me. Like Gaffigan used to drop in at Eastville all the time. Eastville Comedy Club, now New York Comedy Club, 4th Street. I would go up there, and he lived so close to that he would just drop in. And I used to get up there on weekends, and I didn't know he would just watch in the back of the room, my sets. And like and then there was like another, and then he was doing a show on TV Land, and like he made a point to come up to me like on set, and he was like, hey man, I've seen you a bunch, like you're really, really good. It was like, well, I didn't even know you knew I exist,
So yeah, that's fantastic.
So that kind of happens. And then Yeah, just like that's usually the way it works is like people are around you enough so you be funny enough, and then like something, they're either in a place where they can help you or you do a thing where they go, all right, enough's enough, I gotta work with this guy somehow.
Okay, cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the only industry where you're allowed to be watched from a distance and it's gonna not end in murder. Yeah.
You hope someone's secretly watching you. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So how did so tell us how the after the Gotham spot kind of
Oh,
like
sure. Yeah, yeah.
what happened after that?
So after Gotham, I mean, I did Montreal super early. So I started in like 2008, 2009. I got Montreal in 2012. So it was like
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
super duper early. And like it didn't really go great. So that like destroyed.
It was not a good thing.
No, because you gotta understand, I had this like crazy early trajectory in New York comedy where like the third show I did, I think, was this UCB show called Whiplash, where everybody like celebrities would go on the show, and the booker happened to see me do a really good set, and the third show I did was Whiplash. It was just crazy.
Oof.
Dude, I had barely been Anthony DeVito. I've been
Like I'm bringing back Les Dog for this.
Yeah. You're mixing names up on stage.
Yeah, so I had this like insane trajectory where like people, and then I got Montreal in 3 years, so I had this like rocket ship sort of path, and then Montreal went so poorly that my whatever was happening with me stalled for like a couple of years, and then I did Gotham, but I don't think I did another TV thing. So I did Montreal in 2012, and at the time, people were doing like Montreal and doing like late night spots, like a couple months out of their New Faces set. So like I had Gotham in like 2014, I think, but that was a show where a lot of New York comics were doing. So it was a big deal, but it wasn't what other people were sort of getting from the Montreal experience. And so I didn't get a Comedy Central Adam Devine's house party until I think 2017. So those 5 years, I kind of had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder too. Like because Montreal, I had failed so badly there that I was like very like hell bent on kind of proving all of that wrong. So
Gotcha.
when I got Adam Devine's house party, it was kind of like oh, I was due to get it. But it was like actual karmic justice because I got Montreal way too early, and then I got
Right.
Adam Devine's probably a year or two later than I would have. But so that was awesome. That was like in Hawaii. That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You're there. That was the coolest because I was there with like Matt Wayne and Noah Garden Schwartz, who I was friends with.
Oh no, yeah.
So we were like, I mean, we're just like flying on Comedy Central's on Viacom's dime from New York to the North Shore, and that was the coolest thing in the world. And so that tape, that was so fun. And Adam Devine, like all the people involved, super duper cool. And then from there, I think, but they had me warm up the shows. And then the year after that, I got a Comedy Central half hour. And then I was trying to run a late night set for Conan because I was in talks with the Conan booker. And the Colbert booker happened to be at Stand Up New York while I was running the Conan set. And she was really taken by the set. And she was like, hey, look, I don't know when your date is for Conan, but I can get you on Colbert like next week with this set. So then I talked to the Conan booker. He was cool with it. This all happens in 2017. And so then, I worked on like a Colbert set for a couple of months and then did Colbert. And then I would say after Colbert, that's when I started getting real headline work. Cause that, even if it like doesn't do what it used to do for comics, like it does in the eyes of like club bookers throughout the country, they're like, oh, this guy has value. We can, I had an agent at that point. So that really helped in me getting steady work. But yeah. And then that was 2017 and, what is it, 2022? Not too much has happened between now and then.
out of all those, what was your favorite experience?
I mean, they're favorite in like different ways. So Access Gotham Comedy Live, obviously, I would say like that's the best story I like to tell. Like purely like as just a comedian, that's obviously my favorite. Doing a set on a no-name network, the band Train sees you, and now you're comedically, like I don't know how much I could top that. Just as like a series of just like events that I could never see coming. Hawaii was super cool, because I was with friends. It was like my first Comedy Central thing. I had lived in Hawaii in my early 20s. I was homeless in Hawaii. So there was just kind of this like this button on like who I was, who I am now kind of thing. Like,
Okay.
so that was really, really cool and personally for me. And then the half hours were taped in New Orleans, and that was special because like I grew up watching Comedy Central Presents. So to be a part of that sort of tradition was amazing. And they give you a travel budget. I flew like all my family down, my childhood friends. So they were like, because I had been there the year before doing warm-ups. So I kind of knew what it was. And I was like, this is New Orleans. This is a part, like, this is what all the work is for. Like, let's party.
Let's
like,
have fun.
Yeah, man. Like some people wouldn't even bring their family because they were nervous. Like I had friends from high school just drunk in the back having a good time. That was amazing in that sense. And like that was so cool. Like my mom was there just having fun on an edible, not really knowing what's going on, you know what I mean? Full of gumbo. It was great, man. That was so they're all, I cherish them all in very different ways, but that was amazing.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little offended that one of the highlights of 2017 wasn't doing the pit loft. It's doing the pit loft for Drew Morgan's wife and her 3 friends right after your comedy set. I was trying to run this half-hour show, and I asked Anthony to do it. And he was kind enough to say, yeah. And then Drew Morgan was in town, and the only audience members were his wife and his 3 friends.
Yeah.
And I was like, you still want to do a half hour? Because I thought like at that time, I was like, if you could do a half hour, you would want to do it every night. And then I was like, you still want to do a half hour? You were like, nah, I don't think we need to do that.
You do so many that like you're like, I don't want to put these people through the pressure of laughing only them for a half hour. 15. Right. And Drew's wife, she's great as a craft. Friends were cool. And I do remember that show, and it was fun. But no, you do enough of those where you go, oh, if I don't have to know, because you just know ahead of time what's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah, right. But I think you're like, I think their attention span's going to be at like the 15-minute mark.
I feel like Drew probably still did 25. He was feeling it. That was his home crowd.
Drew's got this great quality about him. I mean, I would watch Drew do full sets as characters in rooms in Brooklyn. There's like a DJ there. I'm like, man, I'm barely surviving with my jokes. You want to go up there as like a Tennessee like football coach? Like, go ahead. Like, he wasn't bothered by it. He always had this like quality about him where he's like, it's hard to really ruffle that guy.
Yeah,
that's a great quality. I envy that for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not like that at all. I'm like a waiter.
No. Yeah, you can mess
for a second. I'm like, what can be done?
I'm so sorry. Please tell me how I can fix this.
Let me go talk to the chef real quick, and I'll be back.
Yeah. Or is it the chairs? We can get better chairs in here. What can we do? Yeah.
Is it me? Do you need me to turn around? I'll turn around and tell you. That's fine.
I'll be a whole different guy.
Yeah. You got anything coming up that you want to plug, or any projects or any social media or anything like that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can follow me on Instagram at comedian Anthony DeVito. I usually post like all like upcoming shows and road dates. But I'll be doing, because I've been working on this solo show called My Dad Isn't Danny DeVito, and I'll be at
love it. Already love it. Can't wait.
Thanks, man. I'll be at Planet of the Tapes, February 4th and 5th in Louisville, Kentucky. So
you're coming our way.
Those shows, and follow me on Instagram. I'll be posting about it nonstop leading into it. So, but awesome. This was a lot of fun, guys.
Thank you so much, man. I enjoyed hearing the New York stories and I still can't believe Train. That's just blowing me mind.
I didn't see that coming at all.
He takes my calls too. Like we were. My buddy from college, Connor, was in town, and we were just drunk doing karaoke. And Connor's a musician. He was doing Drops of Jupiter, and we just called Pat, Pat Monahan, the lead singer of Train, during it, and like Pat sang along. Like they're great, man. They're like super cool, man. They're awesome.
That is so awesome to hear. Yeah. Well, cool, man. You can follow me and Will on Instagram. Our links are down below. Hit that subscribe button. We got plenty more episodes coming your way, so stay tuned.